A warm welcome to everybody from Builders Merchants News and Bristan, the UK's largest supplier of showers, taps and bathroom accessories, to this virtual roundtable debate. We've teamed up this afternoon, Tuesday the 10th of November 2020, to discuss the ongoing issues faced by builders merchants and construction material suppliers as they strive to keep the UK merchant sector on track throughout the coronavirus pandemic. We've been joined today by a select group of industry professionals from merchant and supplier management positions. So if I can introduce them as follows, please. We have Ian Hansell.
Good afternoon, Vice President, Bristan Group.
We have Gareth Griffiths.
Hi there, Sales Director Merchant at Bristan Group.
John Newcomb. John?
I'm off mute, sorry about that. John Newcomb, Chief Executive of the Builders Merchants Federation.
Robin Beal.
Good afternoon, Chairman of the IPG Group.
Andrew Harrison.
Good afternoon, Andrew Harrison, CEO of Travis Perkins Plumbing and Heating Businesses.
Ken Beney.
Hi, Managing Director of Fayers.
Stewart Pearce.
Consultant to AVS Fencing and Landscaping Supplies and current Master of the Westerville Company of Builders Merchants.
And Peter Bullivant.
I'm the Commercial Director at Howarth Timber and Building Supplies.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody. Okay, the topics will be posed in discussion format and the debate will be chaired by myself. I'm Tim Wood and I'm the editor of Builders Merchants News. The debate will be videoed, recorded and then transcribed and will appear as a double-page spread in the November-December edition of Builders Merchants News, which goes to press on Friday. So I've got my work cut out in transcribing and getting this to page. Sound bites and the full video will also be used across both BMN and Bristan's websites and social media platforms. Please can I remind you to raise your hand when you want to contribute to a question, and I'll come to you once the previous person has finished speaking. We have 8 questions to discuss. If we can, I know it's difficult, if we can try to limit it to 15 minutes per question, that would be appreciated. That will give us a 2-hour time slot to get the debate done. So if everyone's ready, I'd like to start with the first question, please. How well do you think the merchant sector as a whole is coping with coronavirus? If we can start with maybe a point of view from Bristan, please. Ian, if you can start with that one, please.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I think certainly after the initial uncertainty around whether branches should be open or not, I think the sector has coped incredibly well. I think we've seen customers quickly adapting to the new way, and certainly the way that they've adapted their trade counters to ensure their employees and their customers have remained safe. And I think they've adapted to the new customer needs, certainly like click and collect, whereby a number of our customers, a number of the customers on the panel didn't probably have a click and collect proposition, but they've adapted that throughout lockdown and kept people safe. And I think one of the things I've seen, certainly from the merchants during the pandemic, is that the communication levels have actually improved. And there's a gentleman on the panel who has sort of led the way, in my view, across the merchant sector. Andrew Harrison created a WhatsApp group, and we got a weekly updated message to suppliers, or even more than a weekly if necessary. And that has been sort of rolled out across other customers, and the communication levels have been superb.
Okay, has anyone else got anything to add? How things have gone throughout the coronavirus? I know there was
Stuart's got his hand up, Tim.
I can't actually see that, John, to be honest with you. Hang on a minute. Right, okay, yeah, okay, far away.
Yeah, I actually concur with the first points. I think we have coped pretty well with it and adapted to it. I think probably the biggest difficulty has actually been, certainly from the heavy side perspective, is and timber is actually click and collect is more difficult to do than with taps, for example. I appreciate there are big materials in light side as well, but that is it is more difficult for Heavyside to adapt to that situation. And equally, our staff, and probably staff within the industry, probably were floundering, certainly in the initial sort of 6 weeks, where we clearly had a number of big merchants closed. Not just big merchants, but there were some principal merchants closed during that period. Well, certainly the independent sector generally was open, and there was certainly some feel around sort of like, well, how can that be? Why should we be in? And my next door neighbour isn't. So that's quite a difficult one. I think there's probably a bit more clarity this time, because probably the lockdown isn't as it's constraining as before, I suppose, is probably what I would say. And it's definitely been made very clear by government this time that construction is most definitely open for work and trading, and that's made a big difference, I think, this time as well.
I think it's worth saying, Tim, that certainly from the lockdown at the end of March to what it is today is quite different. Everybody's ready for it, and certainly our customers, the installers, the fact that they are allowed to continue to operate within consumers' houses has led to a significant more level of clarity, and the demand has certainly not dropped off anywhere near. In fact, we're seeing increased demand still, so it's very, very different to the first time around.
I remember I was at the BMF Plumbing and Heating Forum, which John was a member of that day, and there was talk that the 150 million weekly loss to the plumbing heating sector during the peak period of COVID-19, and 1 in 5 were nervous about their future. Is that still the case, do you think, or are people reacting differently to the second lockdown because there is a bit more clarity this time?
I think, Tim, if you look at the sales numbers, so we haven't published the September BMBI data yet, but September will be 8.5% up on last year. I've attended now 3 virtual regional meetings over the last couple of days. I've just come off a call actually with the Southwest region, and I mean, merchants were almost embarrassed to say how good business is right now, because October and November have really followed on from where September ended. And I think there will be a few merchants who will actually finish the year up on last year, which, when you consider where we were at the end of April, when the market was down just under 80%, it's quite an incredible turnaround. And I think it's, you compare our performance as a sector with other sectors, and clearly hospitality, the airline sectors in particular, have been decimated by this crisis. We've rode this crisis pretty well as a sector, in fact, very well as a sector. No question about that. When we were talking in April and May, and I remember those conversations with Andrew and with several other the board members about where we thought this industry was going and where we are now, you'd have never anticipated we would have been in this position. You really wouldn't.
Andrew,
I think there's a couple of bits really. So if I just sort of respond a bit to John's point, I think there are clearly winners and losers in our industry, dependent on which part of the sector you serve. So clearly those that have been servicing local customers, those that have a big percentage of DIY within their business, probably light side merchants, have all fared pretty well post the original lockdown. I think some of the more specialist merchants, those that are involved, for example, in infrastructure and some of the bigger commercial projects, are not finding life quite so easy. So I think we have to be careful that we don't overgeneralise the market. I think it does vary dramatically depending which part you serve. I think, Tim, going back to your earlier question really about how has the merchant sector coped with coronavirus, and particularly if you go back to March, because it's dead easy to sort of forget really what we've been through. I always sort of say to our folks that COVID didn't come with a Haynes manual, so all of us had to work out how to do this ourselves. And I think as an industry, it is remarkable what was achieved. If you go back and think of Nightingale Hospitals and those merchants that were involved in helping get those that infrastructure built in record time, that merchants across the UK that were supporting people, keeping, you know, the UK population warm, dry, safe, roof over their heads, whilst battling the virus that at that time we really didn't quite know what the hell we were battling against. You know, I think you know, somebody earlier on was talking about the BMN awards. Well, I reckon we all flipping ought to come up, and the whole flipping industry should get a gong at the end of this, because it's been remarkable what's been achieved, I think, and we should, regardless of who we work for, I think we should all be pretty proud.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ian,
when you were talking again at the Plumbing and Heating Forum, you said there were lots of reasons to be cheerful. Consumer confidence has started to recover, a booming property market, DIY home improvements to the sector showing growth. People have spent £55 billion upgrading their homes, and KBB sales for Q2 have shown resilience and recovery too. So compared to where we were, let's go back to what's been said earlier, compared to where we are now, and compared to where in March, I mean, it's an amazing recovery, but it's an industry that has always shown recovery, capable of recovery. You know, the recession we had in 2008, everyone pulled through that successfully, and I think it will do again.
I agree, Tim, but I also echo the points that Andrew's made with regards to which sectors have recovered so well. Certainly the RMI markets are probably stronger than they've ever been currently. We're starting to see the housing sector come back a little bit stronger, but it's taken far more time, and the outlook is still a little bit more uncertain with the house builders, and certainly in hospitality and commercial projects. But certainly from an RMI's perspective, that boom doesn't seem to be slowing down at this moment in time. That's certainly what we're seeing. So I think anybody that's serving the RMI market, the consumer should be having a good time of it, as long as you're maintaining your service levels and your customer service levels. And, you know, ultimately it's key to do that, to ensure that we grow and continue to grow our market share.
Ken.
So just something that Andrew mentioned earlier about the specialist market. We're very much a mixed merchant. When we went into this back in April now, you know, we were challenged with shutting our showrooms, which obviously caused us some issues. Our heavy side, we sort of started to sort of close down a little bit. But our specialist market, we came into the beginning of the year with our contracts business absolutely booming. It was going great guns. You know, we were 12 to 15% up on last year. Well, of course, as it shut down, a lot of that work literally got halted, and stock arriving, but nowhere for it to go. So from our point of view, we got hit quite hard. Where we have benefited is we opened our doors up again. The DIY market has supported us. The heavy side market has continued to grow, and we bit the bullet and opened up our showrooms again, probably a little bit earlier than a lot more of them, but by appointment only. So we've seen that continue to boom as people stop spending money. We decided to do their bathrooms up. So we've seen a very mixed bag with it, I must admit, but been able to adapt quite quickly.
Okay, should we move on to the second question?
Stewart.
What are the major challenges your business is facing right now? If we can do that, it just is from each individual. We've got suppliers, you know, we've got a trade association, we've got a buying group here. You know, maybe we can just go around each individual person if we can start. Stewart, I kick that one off.
Well, actually, I just want to make a comment back to that previous point. I was waving, but
okay.
I think we just need to rationalise a little bit of how well, yes, the industry has done, but we have to bear in mind that we went into that original lockdown at the beginning of spring. It was an amazing spring. We had lots of people on furlough, so people were principally exercising out in their gardens. They were laying patios, they were putting fences up and so on as well. You tend not to lay a patio next year and the year after and the year after, or put a fence up the year after and the year after consecutively, or even do a bathroom the year after and the year after. So I think a lot of people have actually taken the plunge and gone in and actually done those jobs. Now, we just have to bear in mind on a DIY perspective whether that will actually manifest itself again into next year as well.
Okay. Just as a point of fact here. I'm just looking at my screen and I've only got 6 people at the top. So if people are putting a hand up, I can't actually see all of you, unfortunately. So maybe
well, Robin, I think Robin had his hand up just now as well.
Yeah,
so.
I can't. I haven't.
Okay.
I've only got 6 at the top of the screen. So
Okay.
if maybe people could just say when we have a silent picture, say Robin or whatever, because it's working at the moment, unfortunately. Robin, did you want to come in there on that?
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, most of it's been said, so I won't go over what's been, and I agree with what's been said. I think, Andrew made the point about so did Ian. We've all done an awful lot. I think there's been a lot of challenges. It's not just 1 or 2. There's been significant challenges and obstacles to get over. Fortunately, on the upside, we've got over most of those. Certain things we've done to make the businesses safe, even though we're in another lockdown now, we're not necessarily having to go and do all those same things because we've done a lot of them. But there is still some concerns about people understanding the rules, for one. And there's another one, which is where people they understand the rules. They're worried about their customers' take on those rules. For example, you mentioned the Nightingale's Hospital was one of you, I think it was Andrew, and rightly so. There's been a huge amount of work done there. One of our members sent me a picture on WhatsApp of him delivering some copper tube to one of these Nightingale hospitals. And I said, brilliant. And he said, yeah, whatever you do, don't show it to anybody else. So, well, I wasn't going to, but why are you worried? He said, well, I don't want to be seen to be profiteering. I said, well, you've got to make a profit. His business won't be there otherwise. And I think there's some fear within people finding a level of, continue to providing a service. We're all doing that. And I think Andrew's right. Whilst we're not necessarily going to get the champagne out just yet, everyone's done a lot of work towards making the industry, safer. And John's right in to say, who would have thought this? Who would have said, in April, we're going to have our worst month possibly ever, if not for many years. And just a few months later, we'd be having record months. And of course, one of the challenges now is shortages of supply. But who would have thought that? And that's another challenge. But it's one we're pretty much all going through. But they're just challenges, if you like, now.
It's the likes of yourself, Robin, with your buying group, and the likes of John with the Builders Merchants Federation. You are the people that anybody who's got any information, they want some information, they may be struggling with something, they come to you as members, don't they? So you provide a vital service yourself, in the same way that obviously the suppliers and manufacturers and the merchants do. You've all got an important role to play within the industry.
Our sort of Cobra meeting last week was, what will members going to need to know? What's the first things we need to start changing on our portal? And I know John's done the same, certainly in the first lockdown. Providing that information, you're right, is very, it's invaluable for sure. Yeah, saves a lot of time for each individual. For example, quite a few of our members thought they were going to have to shut their businesses last Thursday. Right. That surprised me, but they did. They did think that, but they haven't done it. We've reassured them that they don't have to.
But did they come? They came to you because you were the people that could answer the question. Because there was still that confusion. That's still that level of confusion.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Andrew, did you want to come in with something?
Well, I think it is something that should be acknowledged, and I can only speak for the BMF because that's our principal industry body that we use, and the role that the BMF have played throughout this whole thing has been phenomenal. And if any merchant ever questioned what's the point of the BMF, I think this year has answered it in spades. And I think the support, the help that the BMF have provided, not just to smaller members, but actually to members right the way across the spectrum, and that includes suppliers, I think has been phenomenal, and should be again. I'm putting that one up for an award as well, because I think the industry has benefited
I'll vote for that one,
because of it.
Oh, you might.
He's able to get outside the picture in a minute.
But just alluding to the plumbing and heating forum again, John himself said that their membership, the plumbing and heating membership, had increased to 330 members, 206 plumbing and heating merchants, 69 plumbing and heating suppliers, and 55 plumbing and heating specialists. And he said plumbing and heating is a critical part and a growing part of BMF's membership. there is
Yeah.
growth that joining the BMF, and obviously they value the service that you provide, John.
Yeah, I think, first of all, thank you, Andrew, for those comments. I think what's been interesting, I guess it's moving on to point two, is what are the challenges that we faced as a trade association. I mean, from that very first announcement from Boris, I must have taken 250, 300 calls and emails within 48 hours. So I guess the biggest response, the biggest challenge for me personally was to answer each of those queries, many of which were, do we stay open or do we close? You tell us, John, you tell us what we should do. So massive challenge in terms of communication. And then also we've had to work with a much smaller team because we had to take advantage of the furlough scheme. So I had to pull together a core group of people around me that I thought could respond to members' requests and requirements in a short period of time. And I guess the other big challenge we faced is the dramatic decrease in our revenue from training, because literally the first thing to go, as we all know, in a recession is training. So, I mean, our revenue has dropped by probably close on to $500,000 over the last 6 months. So, you know, we've had the same challenges as some of you guys. How do you manage a business when your revenue drops off a cliff like that, but you still need to continue to offer support and service to your membership? So we've had some incredible challenges as a trade association, both from managing the business through the crisis ourselves, and then add to that, if you like, our government responsibility, where we've had daily calls from March the 15th, I think it was, all the way through. We've had daily calls with government, because governments come to trade associations at times like this and say, we need to know what your members are thinking. We need to know, you know, how we can help them. So, yeah, I think I've been at the BMF 8 years. I've never faced the kind of challenges of managing a business through this crisis. I think the older guys amongst us have managed through recessions before, but we've never managed through a pandemic. And this has been quite an incredible experience, purely from a management point of view. So, yeah, I think, you know, we've added 55 members over the last 6 months, which, again, if you'd have asked me back in March, were we going to grow our membership during this crisis, I'd have said absolutely not. And most of those have been merchants, as it happens. So yeah, it's been very positive for us, Tim, but there've been lots of challenges along the way.
Can I just ask for a comment from Ian? Because you said that you've been in industry for 25 years. The downturn in the UK economy is certainly the deepest and most widespread of anything that you've seen. So how does a company like Bristan cope with the current situation?
I think when I was talking at the forum, certainly we were talking about a V-shaped recovery. I don't think any of us had seen how deep that V would go so quickly, but neither of us would have predicted how quickly that V's returned. And, you know, we were starting to see growth in the kitchen and bathroom sector around sort of middle of the year. And we didn't really know whether that was pent-up demand or whether it would continue. But, you know, through July, August, September, October, and even November, since lockdown, demand has just increased. So neither have I seen such a decline, neither have I seen such an increase in such a short space of time, which creates a number of challenges. And you've only got to pick up even this morning's KBB review about the issues around supply in the market. That recovery has caught a lot of people cold. So there's some real challenges around supply currently. I think we've been quite fortunate whereby early on in the pandemic, we invested heavily in air freight. So as a business, we invested nearly £400,000 in air freight to ensure our fastest moving lines were available. We've increased our stock holding by circa 20%. So we've continued to offer that next day service and ensured that we've got 95% COTIF throughout the organisation. So that has led us to some we've bought some goodwill, I guess, by having the stock available, but there's a lot of stock issues in the market and it's played to our advantage. But equally, from a merchant's perspective, I'm sure they've got some real pain at the moment managing their customers' expectations.
Would Ken, Stewart or Peter like to offer a supply side of the argument? How how difficult has it been for you during the last sort of 6-7 months?
Thanks, Stuart. Hand up, Tim.
Sorry, go on then.
Tim, it's Paul, not Peter. Sorry. Okay. I mean, I think we've covered a lot of this in answering the kind of the first question with how we're coping. So I've just I'll put 3 things on the table around key challenges for us right now this minute. Product availability is probably the top of the list. As a mixed merchant, we're kind of seeing it from all sides, from light side through to building through to timber, and whilst that's a challenge, it is also bringing opportunities. It's really highlighting the impact that buying groups are having, and procurement teams within your business. So availability is definitely one for us. And then there are 2 which are probably a bit more functional and a bit more around the whole COVID thing. I think a big challenge for us as a business, particularly in branch, is complacency by staff and customers. Because the industry is going so well and everybody's seeing a surge, it is really easy to lose sight of the health and safety side of things and a social distancing. And we've had a couple of incidents where good, sensible people have just become complacent, and it's caused problems in the business with outbreaks. And then one leading on from that is around the handling of outbreaks themselves. So how do you handle the situation when you have an outbreak of positive tests, or you get impacted by track and trace, impacting your business, and how you weave your way through those rules, because the rules aren't entirely clear, and there's local interpretation and local lockdown rules which cause problems. And maybe for kind of a larger business like ourselves, we've perhaps the resource to be able to weave our way through it, but for some of the smaller merchants in the country, they're likely to find it a lot more challenging. So my 3 biggest challenges: availability, complacency around health and well-being of people, and then how you handle outbreaks when they pop up in your branch.
Is that a similar story for Ken and Stewart, or?
Tim, I'll let Stewart go first because he's putting his hand up, but he's obviously not on your screen to see.
No, he's not. Really sorry, Stewart.
It's all right. I'm not sure I want to claim this first bit. Ian spoke just now about we've all managed through recessions. I'm old enough to and will admit to having worked. Thanks, Robin. I can see the smile. To having worked through the 3-day working week back in the 70s.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that there'd be some guys who would not be that familiar with that situation. Not in this industry at the time, actually, but that was an unbelievable challenge, and a lot of human challenge, but not from a health perspective, but just political human issues. And then, of course, in the 1990s recession, which was probably the worst recession we've ever had, and specifically aimed at construction, where banks withdrew overdraft facilities to builders and so on. That, at the time, I'd been part of the industry for literally 18 months. So, basically 32 years ago. So that was an unbelievable challenge. And that was preceding buying groups. If you're an independent, you actually were independent. You stood by yourself. You had nobody to sort of help out, fall back on, and so on as well. So whilst I'm not by any stretch of the imagination belittling what's going on at the moment, we have a health crisis which we have to resolve, but we also have to face the fact that we may not resolve it, or we may not resolve it, to go back to where we were 2 years ago, 18 months ago. So, we may have to live with this. But what I say, that there were certainly 2 challenges before this. I say it was the early 90s recession and the 3-day working week that were very, very challenging, and probably just as challenging as we're facing today. We are equipped with skills these days, alternative skills, and particularly around the digital stuff, where we can, from an industry, as we mentioned quite early on, click and collect almost didn't exist in the industry, other than a few outlets, the screw fixes and so on. But actually, we have all adapted to that. So I would say we are much, much faster on our feet now, and I would make the point that the digital side of things has been a saviour to the industry, to be quite honest. So we were talking about digital from a very different perspective 12, 18 months ago, about we must get on board, we must get on board. Well, we've almost been forced into it in e-commerce. So it's great. But we also need the skills that are being generated by the younger elements of the business. And my worry is, whilst this group of people, and if I look around the screen, if we did an average age, I'm guessing 50 something. Yeah. Sorry, I bring that up, but 50 something. And I worry that I'm beginning to see things happen whereby the younger element, and people have been talking about this lost generation, sort of 20s to 25s. I'd like to extend that to 35s. These guys that have got skills that must be used in business, I'm not sure that a group of people like us managing businesses will allow those skills to come through.
Just before I get a comment from Ken, just on that point, Stewart, the global pandemic has brought the industry forward 5 years in terms of digitalisation, and that comes from e-common sense.
E-commerce,
so,
yeah.
E-commerce, yeah. So that is one of the the outstanding.
Yes, plus absolutely it is. We have adapted to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are obviously companies like e-commerce sense who are absolutely benefiting big time, but it's a much needed service, isn't it? Ken, did you just want to come in and say anything?
Yeah, I think just to probably echo probably Paul and some of the others. Sorry, pardon me. We went into this back in April with, like everybody, with the challenges, and we weren't quite sure what to expect. And we sort of put it into 3 areas. One was cash flow. Like everybody else, were we going to see the cash coming through from our customers? We were quite fortunate. We did, and cash has continued. The second one was around people. Our own staff, because they were all going home at night watching Sky News and panicking, are we going to be in work? How long are we going to be off? Can we stay at home because it's nice and sunny? And then trying to get them back into work as we opened up was a big issue. And we learned a lot about our staff, if I'm honest, about those that wanted to come to work and those willing to work, and those that were quite happy to sit at home on 80% and soak up the sunshine. And the last one was, we were still operating quite efficiently through April. What we struggled with, and take this in the wrong way, Ian, it was suppliers. Suppliers took the opportunity, as we did, to furlough huge amount of their staff, including key accounts managers, salesmen, all of those people. So trying to chase down stock coming in and where orders were in the pipeline and actually getting product in, we found very, very difficult, because also a lot of those staff, maybe the purchasing staff or whatever, within a lot of the suppliers are actually working from home and didn't necessarily have access to the information back at the factories. So that was one of the biggest problems we had in the first shutdown, was actually understanding where product was and whether or not we could get it in and get it to our customers.
Can I respond to a couple of those things,
John.
Tim?
Yeah.
First of all, on Stuart's point on young people, 35% of our employees now in the BMF are under the age of 30, whereas that's probably would have been 10% if you looked 7 or 8 years ago. The people that I had around me during the furlough period, by and large, were the younger guys who were in their 20s. And I think one of the things that I've learned through this crisis, and I'm sure the other guys have as well, is it's not always the people. Certain people surprise you in terms of the way they respond to a crisis, and actually the young guys I've had around me have moved to a different level.
Yeah.
And they really have, and they've excelled probably because they had the digital and IT skills. So I think we often talk about, we're all passionate, I think, about developing young people in our industry. There are some great schemes like the Kickstart scheme. If you saw the unemployment figures this morning, they're 4.8%. Between 16 to 24-year-olds, it's 14.8%. So we have a real problem in this country, that we have a lost generation. And I think we have a social and moral responsibility in our industries to give these guys an opportunity, because my experience is when you give them the opportunity, they really respond. So I'm absolutely passionate about developing young people. I think just because the average age of the people in here is 50s, it doesn't mean that we don't believe in the development of young people in the industry. And I think we all have to now, put our money where our mouth is and get these people back into our businesses, because they're out there, and they're out there in large numbers. So I just wanted to respond to Stewart's point.
Yeah. Can I just respond to that? Like, what I will point out, John, is obviously, you've lost sort of £500,000 worth of training fees. Yeah, well, that tells the story. Quite rightly, what gets cut first? Training, marketing. Let's switch the lights off because it will save a penny, rather than switch the lights on and tell everybody we're about, come and see us. It's so, that is a worry, and that is out of the, I do know what percentage that is out of the BMF income. That's massive, that's huge. But that is fundamentally a worry. Now, I also accept that it's more difficult to hold training schemes in-house in terms of BMF and so on as well. But the fact is, training has definitely been cut back.
Yeah, and the other point, just to respond to Ken's point, because I think he's got a very valid point. We don't have British gypsum on this call, but there's no question that the reason we're in the plaster situation is because BG closed for a long period of time and furloughed 85% of their staff. I think that was about messaging, and I think we met on the Sunday before the second lockdown as a construction leadership council and made it very clear to government that there has to be strong messaging that construction, and that includes manufacturers, not just merchants, stay open. I don't think it's any coincidence that the PM mentioned two sectors in his speech on Saturday night, and that was construction and manufacturing, both of which we're all heavily involved with. So that to me reflects the lessons learned over the last 7 or 8 months, and the fact that I don't know of any merchants that have closed, and I don't know of any manufacturers that have closed during the second lockdown.
Well, I think one of the issues we had initially with it, John, I know you wrote it out quite quickly, was the first message come out that hardware stores could stay open. That was it. And that was very confusing to a lot of our staff. And
absolutely, Ken.
We're not. I look at Robert Dias on the high street as a hardware store. And I think you cleared that quite quickly with the letter that came out that you published just after the initial conversation, which helped us all, certainly within our business, because we had a lot of people saying we shouldn't be open. We're not classed as essential. Your letter actually clarified that, and we managed to issue that to all of our staff and go, we're staying open.
Yeah, and I think the point is, Ken, this time, hardware stores are still there, but building, they still haven't got builders merchants quite right, but they've got building merchants, which arguably covers plumbing and heating merchants and roofing merchants. And again, I think that's indicative of the progress that we've made over the last 7 or 8 months. Government actually understand what we do now as a distribution sector, which they didn't really 8 months ago.
Sorry, Andrew.
I think we are tough on ourselves. Am I surprised that we've got some supply issues at the minute? Not really, because we ourselves found it incredibly difficult to forecast our forward needs. Certainly when you go back earlier in the year, and most of our forecasts, particularly if we're talking about Far East procurement, we're looking 6, 9, 12 months ahead in some cases, as are our manufacturers for their products and components. I'm still not certain that this isn't a bubble that we're going through. I struggle to understand how the economy can have the hit that it's had and we don't see it. Now, whether there's a lag, whether it's actually once we get Christmas out of the way and get into the new year, things will be very different. But as the unemployment, as John just says, at 4.5%, at some point, one has to assume that affects consumer confidence. And if it affects consumer confidence and people are concerned about their jobs, they don't buy the car, they don't go on holiday, they don't think of changing a bathroom and kitchen. So yes, it is frustrating that we've had supply shortages, and some, you do feel are a little bit of an own goal. But I think we ought to just be mindful of the challenge and the task that we're facing as an industry as we try and predict forward. And actually, on top of that, we've still got Brexit to get through. And what the hell does that mean for us? Because with a no-deal Brexit, that in itself is going to have implications. So yes, we as merchants, it's bloody frustrating when you can't get stuff. But I am slightly mindful of why we're in this predicament. I just want to, and I don't know whether it's answering your question, Tim, because I've completely forgotten what the question was, but Paul raised something.
Major challenges, Andrew.
Beg your pardon?
Major challenges that your business facing.
And I want to just back up something that Paul said, because one of the things that does strike me as being quite different now to earlier in the year is the degree that actual cases are having and impacting on branch life. We are definitely seeing more cases in branches, and whether it is complacency, probably, I think that's a fair observation, Paul. We're definitely seeing where we have had cases in branches that it then follows on, that we get more cases within that same family of people in a branch, and therefore the challenges of, okay, that team has to go and protect themselves, we've got to clean the branch, and then we've got to find a new crew to man the branch. That's definitely a bigger challenge than it was earlier in the year. Now, whether that's, you know, whether it is actually the second wave going through or better track and trace, not too certain why, but we're definitely seeing more cases of that.
I think just on that, Andrew, I think this is nothing that we as an industry can control, but I think the messages that come from the media seem to flip-flop about. So 1 week it's crisis, the following week it's positive news and everything's flattening, and I think that affects all of our complacency, because we you know, the news this week that there's a vaccine on its way will kind of give everybody a breath, but is it really a solution? And you know, it can really impact all of our businesses if you get a branch go down, and you know, it doesn't even need to be people going down with positive tests. For example, we've had a branch this week where one person tested positive with no symptoms, but through track and trace, we've lost the whole of the internal team, and then you have to get a kind of an emergency team together from close by branches, which impacts those. So we consider that a real challenge for us, and keeping everybody on message and just careful and safe is a really important message, I think.
Well, I just wanted to finish my sorry, Ken, I know you had your hand up.
That's right.
Just finish my earlier point, which again is another thing that you raised, Paul, and actually also supports something that Stewart said earlier on, is we have definitely seen an increase in accidents within the business, and probably more so in our heavy side and timber operations. And I think my sort of answer for that is that we have asked those teams to work quite differently, because ordinarily in a heavy side operation, whilst we might say we serve customers, the truth is an awful lot of customers serve themselves in heavy side and timber operations, and then we write a little ticket for them. That's the bit we do. Clearly in a lockdown situation, we've had to pick every brick block and stick of timber. No customers have been allowed to pick their own orders for a good part of this year, and that has meant those teams working in our yards have worked considerably harder, more physically, in quite demanding situations. So I think, again, my concern and one of our challenges is keeping people safe, and we nearly always have more concern as we get into the winter months because of dark operations in yards, wet, damp, cold, and all the things that we get in winter. So the three things really that Paul voiced some time ago, I'm actually just echoing. We've got exactly those same issues in our business.
Ken, do you just want to finish up?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things there is the inconsistency. Paul, we had one of our senior warehouse staff go down with COVID. Has been diagnosed with COVID. We've taken the appropriate action here of isolating everything, doing everything we need to, but we haven't been contacted. So, and that brings its own complacency into our business. I go, well, that no one's really worried. It's not happening. They keep on about test, track and trace, but we're not actually seeing that here.
Yep.
We had probably 6 members of staff in the last 6 weeks, 4 related to somebody with COVID, but we've not been contacted once. And again, that gives our senior management, no one's really looking, it's all okay, we can carry on. And say complacency is an issue.
Yeah.
without a doubt. And whether or not everyone else sees that inconsistency through the UK, I don't know.
Okay, just a couple of things before we move on. Gareth, I don't know if you've been able to hear us because your microphone is red. So, there you go. Thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, and secondly, we had some chats with Bristan before we went ahead with this roundtable, and Brexit was off the agenda. So, otherwise we'll be here.
Yeah,
I know firsthand from attending the Brexit forum or listening to the Brexit forum that BMF put on last week. They still haven't got a lot of the answers themselves, and they're the experts about Brexit. So I think we'll move on to the Brexit subject and maybe not use the B word again.
Can we take the US election off as well, please? Tim?
Yes, we will do. Yes.
Tim, are you going to fine me for that? Are you? No. Okay. If we can talk about how businesses are adapting, what have been the benefits of change, and what have been the success stories so far? If anybody wants to answer that particular question. Again, if you could just say, Paul, do you want to kick off?
You go first.
The one that immediately springs to mind is video conferencing, and how that has impacted efficiency, particularly in kind of the central roles. Obviously, the guys at the front end need to work on a counter, but everybody adopting very quickly video calling allows, quick, short, sharp meetings, more of them, and it's just really streamlined efficiency. I think that's a big plus for us.
Thank you. John, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I want to say a couple of words about the image of the industry and the reputation of the industry. So I was on a ministerial call with Nadeem Zahawi on Monday. We have 2 weekly calls now with the minister. It's about 50, 60 of us on the call. He actually was telling us that he's using construction as an example internally with government on how sectors have adapted and responded to change. So I guess it's reinforcing the point I was making earlier, Tim. I think our sector has respect now, which it didn't have before. I think if anybody hasn't seen the case studies on the Construction Leadership Council of what, many of which are our members, but the whole industry did, backing up Andrew's point, it wasn't just about building Nightingale hospitals. We saw some amazing stories, people like Moran's, for example, of distributing PPE to people who needed PPE on the front line. I mean, there are case studies. There are, I don't know, there must be 20, 30 case studies from various organisations that from the construction industry of the way we as a sector and industry have responded to this. So I actually think one of the major benefits of COVID has been the profile and the image that our industry has now compared with where it was, and particularly in terms of the respect that we have within BEIS and in government circles now. It's moved to a different level. It really has.
Robin, can I ask you from a sort of IPG point of view? You obviously run your column with us on a monthly basis, and there are a lot of success stories that you highlight within that. Can you just allude to those within the IPG?
Yeah, sure. Some of it's going to echo what's been said. Naturally, I think one of the ways that companies have adapted, us included, is e-commerce. You mentioned the 5-year fast forward. Lots of things that I guess a lot of us are doing now, including this Zoom call. If somebody had come to us a year ago and said we're all going to be making more Zoom calls, I think that's possibly where Stewart's point comes in. Those of us that are 60, like me, think, would we? But somebody at 30 would say, yeah, well, we're already doing it, Dad or Uncle or whatever. And I think it was coming, but it wasn't coming very fast. It was trickling down a pipeline, and it's just been massively accelerated. And whilst, none of us want to celebrate a horrible pandemic, there are absolutely some really good things that have come out of it. And I think John's right. The industry has rightly being seen to be more credible now. We've risen to those challenges. So I think a lot of it is you can't be ageist, can you? You can't be sit down and say somebody my age is not interested and somebody half my age is. It's not as simple as that. But I guess we can generalize and say you know, if I look across our sort of 200 members, if I walk out and see one tomorrow that I've never been to see yet, and I walk in and there's somebody between 20 and 40, probably subconsciously I'm thinking this person's going to listen more than if they're my age or older, or even some of them could be approaching that. And I think there is that, it's the mindset. It's not necessarily the physical age, but the mindset, I guess, is what Stewart was alluding to, and I agree with that. So,
exactly that, yeah.
Yeah, it's the mindset of, you know, I'm no techie, for example, but I like to think of myself as reasonably forward thinking. I'm here on a Zoom call now. You know, I will embrace new things as much as I can, but there clearly are some people that absolutely don't and don't want to. And we probably see that now within our membership. Some of them we're thinking, do you know what? They're a nice bunch of people, but are they going to be here in 5 or 10 years' time? Probably not, sadly. But there are others that are really moving forward. Somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was John, about some companies have not only caught up now from April, May, June, but they're going to have a better year this year than ever before. And that's really exciting, isn't it? The worrying bit is what Andrew said, and I don't disagree with him. This could be a bubble. So, yeah, Stewart quite right. He said you don't relay your paving every spring, and I guess you don't change your kitchen and bathroom every spring, etc., etc. You don't put a new staircase in every spring. So, and of course, at the moment, people. Lastly, really, from me, I think is a lot of people, most people, including me, haven't really gone on holiday this year. We've done that other stuff. If next year or the year after, or hopefully both, we can all clear off on holiday, we'll be queuing up to do so.
Yeah.
And either we've done the bathroom and therefore we haven't got to do it again, or we haven't, but that can.
We're not going to.
because I'm off to Portugal or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think hence why British Airways shares shot up by 40% yesterday.
Staggering amount.
Exactly. Hearing there was a vaccine.
Yes. Yeah.
Certainly, I think from a success perspective, I think John mentioned it earlier that people have really stepped up and step changed their performance within businesses and gone that extra mile to ensure that customers get what they want when they want it. And we had an instance this year when actually our warehouse manager and one of his operatives actually came in and opened the warehouse on a Sunday because we actually had an order arrive on the Friday afternoon for a Nightingale hospital, and they came in and picked it, packed it and delivered it over a weekend. And they didn't need to do that, but they wanted to do it. And they don't get paid to do it, but they went that extra mile, which was incredible.
But that comes back again to what John was talking about with the way the builders merchant sector its image has improved, isn't it? People have had to work harder, and it's improved. It's just improved the general image of the merchant sector as a whole. So there's a lot of that going on. From the stories we've been running in BMN, there's a lot of success stories of people going that extra mile. I hope some of them will be included in the Builders Merchants Awards when we actually get around to hosting them, whenever that might be.
My colleague, Gareth.
I haven't said anything yet, so.
Andrew, do you want to come in?
Yeah, because shall I go first, Gareth, and you can follow me? Is that all right?
Andrew, yeah, that's fine.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I just want to be clear that I'm only over 50 on the outside.
Yeah, we all
are. I think one of the biggest things that is going to change that we've seen, particularly organisations like ours, really, that uses an awful lot of office space, is what is going to happen to office space going forward. Not just for our organisation, but actually, if you think about it, the building of offices is actually something that a lot of our members and representatives do, and I suspect a lot of those buildings are going to have to be rethought in terms of what their purpose is going forward. If you think of the City of London, I cannot see those big tower blocks being repopulated by banking colleagues. Our own business, we are now operating or planning to operate our offices at probably a third of the capacity they once were at, because of home working, because of the ability to do Zoom and all the other variants of that. But we've shown that actually home working can be incredibly effective for people and actually opens up lots of opportunities. You know, again, a company like ours, we always struggle to recruit, let's say, commercial people because we pretty much employed them all in Northampton. But now, actually, there's no reason why a commercial person couldn't live on the Orkneys, actually, with modern technology and do a very effective job. So I think that's probably one of the biggest changes that we, well, certainly speaking for myself, could not have foreseen as we entered into the year, is that we would completely rethink our use of offices.
Gareth, did you want to come up?
Yeah, well, interestingly, that kind of endorses about what I was just about to say, and I think Paul touched on it earlier, is for me, managing a field sales team, that the use of technology has absolutely improved the way in which they work together, and they try to help each other, and best practice is shared across, because it's much easier to see whether somebody's available or not to help you out. I think also that's not just for the field sales team, that's them working with our internal departments as well. That for whatever reason, that technology has just allowed us to work together better. And I think the other thing is, obviously, don't underestimate the savings in time you have from not driving places. It can add, even if you live half an hour away from your office, it's adding, an hour onto your day that can be used productively. So yeah, there's some definite benefits from the use of technology, I think.
Stuart's got his
Stuart,
hand.
did you want to come in?
Yeah. Just having sort of probably, of all of you, probably been around longer than most.
You'll get the jab first, Stuart. That's one advantage.
That's a bonus. Yeah. The one saying that's always been attributed to this industry is people do business with people, and particularly in this industry. And I think, as with so many things, it's so easy to get carried away. Well, this is the way forward, and we all go charging onto Zoom, or we do this, or we do. But actually, the one thing that's happening at the moment, I think, is that we're losing connectivity between teams. And so I don't mean teams in terms of Zoom teams, if you see what I mean. But actually, even within offices where, whilst I'm not involved so much now on a daily basis, but the fact is, 4 or 5 people in the office instead of the normal 20 means there's just not the normal vibe or rub-off or information exchange that would just be through conversation, or the relationship building that we've all had over the years. And Robin, I've obviously known for years as well. But it's about that personal contact. And yes, we have good times, we have bad times, and so on as well. But ultimately, we're still in the same industry, and we still come back and we attend conferences, supplier days, exhibitions, and so on as well. And there is a sort of social side to that as well. I understand that, and I'm not advocating for 1 minute that we should go piling back into this massive social event calendar, because I did think it was far too big. But ultimately, we are losing some contact between suppliers, merchants, our own customers as well. And I think we just need to bear that in mind. It isn't all going to be one way. We're not going to do everything on e-commerce. We did during April and May, a part of June, everything, it was almost impossible to cope with, but actually we did cope with it. But it didn't stay at that level. So, but not everything. So it's not like it feels at times like we're charging to one side of the ship, and the ship's going to start tilting over. Then we're going to have to go back to the other side again. There's always a balance in everything we do. And I feel at this moment, we're just a bit out of balance. And we can't do anything about it, obviously, but it just feels a little bit like that. And there's some rebalancing to do as we go through. And next year, I think 2021 is going to be absolutely fascinating.
Just to come in on that one, we obviously hold our awards in November. That's a prime example of everybody getting together, socialising, having a drink, having a great time. We don't even know if we're going to be okay to hold it in May because of the current situation. But that's the kind of event that, the NMBS do events, to BMF do events. Everybody has had to cancel. We'll move on to that later, because we've got a discussion to be had in question 6 about the lack of live events and how to engage. So maybe we can move on now to the 4th question, if that's possible. And it kind of 4 and 5 are kind of as one, really. How has the relationship between suppliers and manufacturers evolved during the pandemic? And how will suppliers and manufacturers work together for the future? So, you know, they kind of roll into one, but they are sort of the here and now and looking further forward. So does anyone already come in on the supply side maybe to start that, how they're working with manufacturers?
Yeah, I would say that certainly the relationship with a lot of our suppliers has got better as a buying group. And Paul bear this one out. One of the things that we looked, sorry, I'm part of Fortis as well. So we looked at this beginning of the pandemic where we knew that we would see a massive decline in purchases for a number of months. And how does that affect all of our members in terms of year-end rebates and quarterly rebates and monthly rebates? We made a decision to go and talk to all of them, as I'm sure everybody did, to their own suppliers, and said, how can we work through this? How can we find a way of trying to lessen the pain, accepting that they were going through an element of pain as well? And it was quite refreshing to how many of them wanted to work with us as a group to say, yeah, let's realign our budgetary targets. Let's look at how we can put promotions in place. Let's see how we can make sure you've got supply. So it was really refreshing from a supply point of view and a merchant point of view, how that relationship developed and continued to develop, and actually now making it easier to negotiate for next year.
Anyone else want to come in?
Yeah.
Go on, Andrew. Sorry, Paul. Go on.
That's okay. No.
Again, I can't see your apology.
I'd echo Ken. I think it's brought us closer to suppliers. You've had to work closer with suppliers to secure your product. I think the issue that it raises with me is what price loyalty now. So when the going's been good, I think it's easy for merchants to be promiscuous around suppliers and chop and change. I think right now where a lot of product is in short supply, it brings loyalty into it, and looking after the how do manufacturers and suppliers look after the customers who have been loyal to them over the recent times, and what that means in the future.
Okay.
Tim, can I make a point? I think the relationship has changed over the last 7 or 8 months. I mean, if I look back to April and some of the calls I was getting from suppliers, some of which were possibly 1 or 2 letters that initially went out, and without naming names, from certain merchants saying that payments would be deferred or wouldn't be paid at all, and then there was a whole issue around NMBS stopping payments. I took a lot of calls from very upset suppliers who basically said the relationship will never be the same. The number of conversations I had with supplier members that says, actually, this relationship will never be the same again. Now, I think we've moved on from that, and people almost have forgotten that. But I do remember in the height of the storm, if you like, some of those suppliers who were desperately concerned that they wouldn't be paid or their payments would be deferred. And again, as the Construction Leadership Council, we reacted quite quickly to that and said it's imperative that that money flow continues right the way throughout the supply chain. A lot of merchants were also worried that they wouldn't get paid by customers. And then we had the whole issue of trade credit insurance, which again, let's not forget, that was a massive issue back in April and May where cover was being withdrawn or dramatically reduced. Again, we stepped in, we talked to government, and we got a trade credit reinsurance scheme launched. So I think we look at the picture now, and it sort of, I agree exactly with what Paul and Ken have said, but I think we've had to go through some pain and misery to get to where we are, because I do remember those calls back in March and April, and there was some fairly hairy things going on in terms of that whole relationship between the two.
So in terms of suppliers and manufacturers working together, you alluded to the fact that the beginning of the pandemic, and then you've gone on to how it is now. So how do you think they're going to work together in the future? They're obviously going to learn from the mistakes that were made at the beginning of the pandemic.
I Paul's point about loyalty, and you know, it's an overused word, but that word partnership, it's interesting to see some of the buying groups now are extending their relationships to 3 years from 1 year relationships. And maybe there'll be more of that security for the suppliers having those longer term relationships with merchants. I mean, I was a supplier for 25 years, so I feel like I've been both sides of the fence, and you know, I've got sympathy with Ian, because I faced most of the challenges that he did when I was a supplier, and it fundamentally boils down to building that strong partnership with those key suppliers that, you know, have supported you throughout this period. And I think Paul's eloquently put it that perhaps those merchants now are starting to really realise where they've got those long-term relationships, strong relationships, how that can benefit them, particularly in an area where we have shortage of supply right now.
Ian, do you want to come in on that? Obviously, John's referring to you as a supplier. So do you want to come back and
Yeah, I think the guys have already said it. There were some early challenges, particularly around about payments. But I think we ironed those out fairly quickly with individual businesses and came up with payment plans which suited all parties. But in general, our customer base has been excellent with regards to paying outstanding invoices. So we haven't had a cash flow issue throughout this, to be honest. I think the whole pandemic has certainly challenge the relationship between suppliers and merchants, particularly at the front end of our businesses, particularly with regards to salespeople and how we get the message across to your branches around wherewithal, around added value of products, features and benefits. So we're starting to invest in, you know, new platforms of how we can get those messages across. Certainly, I guess the same question for you guys is where you've got your own external sales teams, how you interact with your customers is going to change. Until there's a vaccine, that's going to change dramatically. And yes, we've got the platforms of Zoom and Teams, and a lot of the research, the insights that have been driven through BMF of, you know, around about up until lockdowns, there was still 50-60% of our customers didn't want to visit from a salesperson. And I can fully understand that, because you've got to keep your staff and your customers safe. But I guess it will test the relationship in time of how we continue to drive our own business through the relationship through the trade counter staff, particularly because they want contact by phone rather than they haven't got the opportunity to take time out necessarily and take Zoom calls. So if all suppliers start ringing your branches, how on earth are they going to serve your customer base whilst the phone doesn't ring off the hook, basically? So we've got some challenges how we do that together. And that's one of the questions, I guess, from today is how we work together to ensure that all the new products, all the new technologies that we offer, all the new training opportunities continue to flow throughout our relationship in the future.
Yeah, I think what Stewart said earlier, Tim, was spot on, that the future is going to be a balance between use of the new technology, because Zoom and video conferencing won't be the answer to everything. You know, we're still a very much a face-to-face industry, and people still want to see that replicated. So I think video conferencing and the technology will help us, but it's not the entire answer. And just to back up what Ian was saying, I mean, if I look at my call data for the team over the past couple of months since they came back to work, 90 to 95% of the calls we're having to make now are actually on the phone. So for us, that is a challenge going forward about how we maintain those relationships with our merchant customers without necessarily being able to go and see them all face to face.
Okay. Does anyone else want to comment on the
Andrew's got his hand.
Sorry.
Andrew's got his hand.
Sorry. Yeah, Andrew.
There's a few things that have come from that I'd quite like just to do, not in any particular order. I think loyalty is a funny word. I'm not so sure people do what it says on the tin. So yes, there was a lot of huffing and puffing and complaining earlier in the year, but I suspect as soon as a nice little order is in the offing, that will all get forgotten pretty quickly. So we shouldn't kid ourselves that the world's going to change, because it probably ain't. One question, Tim, you've probably not got on your list today, but probably we do need to all face into, is the role of the sales force. Yeah. Not just manufacturers calling on merchants, but actually merchant sales force calling on customers. Because on one hand, it is a massive cost to the industry. If you added the combined cost of running all the sales forces, whether it be manufacturer, distributor, supplier, merchant, whatever it might be. And there are new, better, different ways of providing that connection. Now, I'm not saying that it's the death nail of a visiting call, but actually it has already changed the way we're thinking about the role of the sales force and how we can best utilise that resource. So I do think the industry, that is one change that the industry has still got to work its way through. And actually, we're one of the merchants that at the moment are saying to manufacturers, look, actually, we'd rather you didn't call on our branches at the moment, because we are trying to, this pandemic ain't over, and we're trying to protect the welfare of our people, and yours for that matter. So I think that's quite a big question. And then my third point, and Ian, you were kind enough to allude to something earlier on. The big thing I think for us is this thing around communication. And it ties a bit with what Stewart says about, we are a people industry. Now, I don't have to physically shake Ian by the hand to give him a good cuddle and thank him for what he does for our business, and to build my relationship with Ian. And I think we've tried, and actually, not wanting to blow our own trumpet, but I think we've done a pretty good job, not just with suppliers, but with customers and actually our own people. Because the bit to remember is we all ended up with 3 distinct groups of colleague. We had colleagues working in their normal place of work. We had colleagues working from their homes, and then we had colleagues who were furloughed. And we had to find ways to communicate and keep in touch and keep people motivated and engaged with those 3 very distinct groups of folks, plus customers, plus suppliers. So, the importance of communicating and treating suppliers with respect in the same way you treat your customers with respect. So this whole thing around payment earlier in the year, any calls that we had to make to our suppliers, I made myself. I didn't rely on, no disrespect, Paul, people in the commercial team to make tough calls to suppliers. I chose to do it myself as a leader of the business, and I'm sure that would be true for many others. And it is the key to this business. I think our whole industry is talking to each other.
Okay, thank you.
Stuart's got his hand up, Tim.
Stuart.
Yeah, just a quick one on the Salesforce thing. I actually think the word that might be used is going to be opportunity going forward. Not opportunism, but opportunity. Because the fact that face-to-face contact is still going to be required to some extent. And I can certainly see smaller independents either maintaining or actually starting their own external sales force. I think it's more difficult to do and maintain for the nationals, but I do believe that independents will strike on that particular issue and actually reinforce their sales forces. I'm not saying tomorrow, but I could actually see that coming in as an avenue into the marketplace.
Just Robin, on that side, obviously on the plumbing side, do you agree with what was said there, or do you agree with Stewart?
I definitely agree with Stewart. I've got a question for Andrew, and it's around that. I don't totally disagree with you, Andrew, about merchant manufacturer suppliers coming to you, but the question is about your own sales team from branches, or any of you any of you individual merchants or bigger merchants. Most of our members don't have sales teams, but if you've got a sales team, and you will have, Andrew, I'm sure. So you're saying you don't want manufacturer reps calling on you, but are your reps being seen by your customers?
Well, we've gone through different phases, Robin. Clearly in the initial first lockdown, clearly everybody was off the road.
Were furloughed, yes.
Furloughed. When it started to lift, it is very much case by case. Now, actually, by and large, we found our customers were quite welcoming for example, I do a lot of customer calls myself, so I had nobody really say that they didn't want to see us. In the second lockdown, or this particular lockdown, we are again trying to avoid people going out to meet customers unless there is a real need on behalf of the customer. And actually, for similar reasons, we've said with our suppliers, actually a lot of customers also have said, doing a Google Meet or a Zoom call is quite a convenient way for me to keep in touch, because it means I can have my 30 minutes with you and get back to other things, or I don't have to travel. So I think it is going to evolve and change, Robin, from what it would have been a year ago.
Yeah. I think there's two big things over these calls. One is that we will probably do it more often. I think a lot of us would put our hands up and say, in the past, we might have had a physical meeting with somebody, and then kind of nothing really happens until the next physical meeting. And actually not too much communication in between. Whereas now there's lots more communication generally, because there isn't a physical meeting. And secondly, the amount of people you can bring in on it. We would find it particularly difficult, for example, to get marketing people to come and see us here in Littlehampton, or IT, or commercial finance people. We're now having Zoom meetings with finance directors and marketing directors and those people, because it's relatively easy to bring somebody in on a Zoom call. It's not unusual to have 3, 4, 5, 6 people from a manufacturer sitting in on a Zoom call, whereas a physical call it would have been 1 or 2 people. And I think just lastly on the subject of what's the raise in the first place, what's the real future for sales teams, which is how this kicked off, is it will be a little bit like e-commerce. It will be the same question. What will happen is it will be fast forwarded what was going to happen anyway. This isn't just about a pandemic. A lot of what I call milk rounds were going on, which weren't really necessary. We've all had it where someone knocks on the door now and says, "Oh, Robin, Joe's here to see you," because he or she's passing. Just been to Portsmouth, on his or her way back to London, thought they'd pop in. And Joe might be a nice person, but we're all more conscious of time than ever. So I think I'm going out. Funny enough, I'm like Andrew. We're not going out as much. I'm going out tomorrow to see one of our members. It's planned. I'd like to think that I'm going to add some value. I'm pretty damn sure that person will add some value to me, which is why I'm going. But that should only ever be the case. If the virus stops tomorrow, would we all go back to what I call milk rounds? I don't think we ever will. So I think that's changed forever. The real question is to what degree, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the field sales
shares dropped by 20%. Was it yesterday, today? But they have only dropped by 20%. They're still hundreds of percent more than they were a year ago. So when you see the headlines this morning, it said, I think the word was plummeted. The Zoom shares have plummeted. And I thought, well, what does plummeted mean? Well, actually, I've lost 20%. That's not bad, is it? Shares go up and down anyway. I'd still put money in Zoom. I think those kind of businesses will just continue up now because we've started to use them. We've found the button, and we'll continue to use them. Just we will introduce. I think we're all saying the same thing. I think we will introduce more physical calls, but as and when, we'll think much more about as and when it's appropriate. Is there value being added? Whether it's you going out, us going out, or somebody coming to see us.
Yeah, Robin,
Gareth, you were nodding continually through that. Do you want to final say on this particular question?
Robin and I have talked about this already, and totally endorse what he's just said. I mean, as somebody that runs a sizable field sales team, if those people haven't got a purpose of going into a branch to do a visit, why are they going? I think Robin's right. That shouldn't just be because of the pandemic. That should be happening anyway. So whether that's providing information about the new products that we do, whether it's training people, whether it's talking about what local specification and contract business is happening. I think the whole COVID-19 situation has kind of crystallised that situation. And we've worked quite hard at Bristan Group to try and develop the sales team to get away from what Robin's calling as a milk rounds. I can post brochures out to people. I don't need to pay a sales team to go out and drop it on a tray counter. So it is all about adding value.
Okay.
Does everybody think
Paul, quick one?
Yeah, I'm just going to ask, does everybody think we have the nerve in the industry not to revert back to pre-pandemic? I think you're right. This has accelerated everything, and kind of Stewart's point about getting the mix right between video meeting and face-to-face, and then the whole milk round of sales teams for merchants and for suppliers. If we acknowledge change is needed, have we the nerve to make that change?
Well, I was going to say,
okay.
We have an external sales team, and that's actually, we furloughed all of our team at the beginning of the pandemic, like everybody else, because no one was seeing it. We brought them back at the end of August, and actually we're now being driven to take them part-time. Not because nobody wants to see them, but the vast amount of our customers, our contract customers, have decamped their buyers or their specification teams to work at home, and there is no facility for our sales team to go and visit them in their house. Now, a lot of these companies are based down in Canary Wharf or in central London, the something Andrew alluded to earlier, they're not going back into their offices. We're being told very clearly that they're moving out of these offices, they're going to continue allowing their staff to work at home. So actually, that's pushing us either, dare I say it, reducing our sales team, because they're going to be working from home, can certainly do a lot more in a day than trying to go out and see 4 or 5 customers, or at best, maybe looking at working a slightly different way in having them working part-time, permanently. So, as I say, we're not necessarily driving it. The way that our customers are working are going to drive that for us.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just quickly come on? I think there is a distinction here, because if you're a merchant, most of your customers will be working on sites. With the rest will in the world, you're not going to be doing a Zoom meeting with a guy in muddy boots. Yeah, a bit like looking out the window today, expecting him to come on, put his bricks down and then start talking to you about the next job or what he's after. That's not going to happen. Those visits will, if they haven't already started, and they have, then they would definitely be. If you don't do that as a merchant, then, as I said, opportunity, then the smaller independents will definitely be doing that. From a manufacturer's perspective, it's not just dealing with all due respect to Juice and the nationals and so on, but there are an awful lot of single 1 and 2 branch merchants who are the owners are generally who do the buying and so on as well. They might even be packaging, they may be serving on the counter and so on as well. They're not going to break off from what they're doing, because it's a tight run ship anyway. They're not going to break off what they're doing to do a Zoom call. So you will still need an external sales force to take that business as well.
Okay.
It's right. I think it's that balance again. It's coming back.
Yes, it's balance. Absolute balance. Yeah.
Okay. Talking about regular engagement. If we move on to the next question, no live events, no exhibitions, no conferences, forums are being held online. Face-to-face meetings are much reduced as well, as we've all discussed previously. So, as far as engagement with your customers, what are you all doing to ensure that you actually are in contact and you're still providing that service to your customers? Just maybe if we could start with John and Robin particularly, just because I know you both hold conferences every year, and having attended both of them, from a journalistic point of view, they are really, really good fun. They get the message out there. The social side comes across very well. But if you're not holding them and you're doing your annual conference over a Zoom meeting, it doesn't quite have the same effect. So can you both start to answer that question? Obviously, then we'll go around the table, so to speak.
Robin, shall I kick off? As far as the Members' Day event that we held virtually this year was concerned, very successful. 188 people on that call. Was it as good as a normal face-to-face Members' Day? No, it wasn't at all, because, and would I choose a video call like that over a face-to-face event? Never, because you miss all of that socialization, whether it's be in the bar, whether it's coffee, or whether it's, it's all of those meetings that take place outside of the formal event where the real business is done. So I can't wait to get back to live events again. As a matter of interest, we haven't announced this yet, but our conference in June is now sold out, 8 weeks after we launched it. What does that say? That says the industry is desperate to have an event. And you may have seen this morning that the NMBS exhibition in April has been cancelled and now postponed to September. So it's likely to be the BMF conference will be the first major event of the calendar. So do I think it will go ahead? Yes, otherwise I wouldn't have planned it. I think with the virus announcement a couple of days ago, that's quite positive. And my own view is that events and exhibitions will start to come back probably from around May, June of next year. So, but will virtual events ever replace face-to-face live events? No, I don't believe they will. Not in our industry. I think there are other industries where, typically if you have 1,000 people and you can suddenly get 8,000 people on a call, there's massive advantages. But so yeah, I look forward to the moment that we can start live to live events. I think, unfortunately, what will happen next year is you'll get an awful lot of events crammed into a very, very short period of time. So you've got all the buying groups that I know are planning to hold their events next year. Obviously, NMBS, there's ourselves. So you're going to get a congested few months between June and probably the end of November. But I don't know of any buying group that's not planning to hold their buying group event next year. And I don't know whether it's ourselves or NMBS that are not planning to launch live events next year. So that's where I am, Tim.
It would be a very interesting master merchant if it was held online, wouldn't it, John?
Yeah, I don't think that would work either. So yeah, I should have mentioned that as well.
We hope Street online, that's for sure. Robin, buying groups, as far as events, John said he's not aware of any of that coming up. What's your take on it? You have your conference for a start, don't you?
Yeah, we do. Ours has been we've always had ours biennial, so it's every other year. So we didn't have one to cancel this year, but I can just breathe a sigh of relief, if you like, that we didn't have that, because I'm sure, like many of your events, it would have had to have been. So we saved the pain of that, but it has left us with the dilemma of, do we go ahead in 21? What do we do? When do we do it? How do we do it? Does it differ? And it may differ, of course, notwithstanding the announcement over a possible vaccine. And of course, there's still a lot of uncertainties about that. I think there's two factors here. Your question was about events and other things. So events, I agree with John. If it's either going to be pretty good news, there's a lot, and the only problem we'll have is almost going to be too much to go to. That'll be a nice problem to have. I agree with John. We miss those things, and that would be a better problem to have than the opposite, which is it ain't really going to happen, is it, guys? Because things are just not good enough, or we're going to hold an event and nobody comes. But there are lots of other things we're doing, not just what we're doing now. But for example, we're working with manufacturers to hold training courses, online webinars. Nothing new about a webinar, you say, but how many merchants really engage with them? Now we're getting a really good take up, because for a manufacturer, it's really cost effective. Instead of finding somebody to go down to here and wherever it is, or up country, down country, across country, it's much more cost effective and obviously less risk, which is where it starts from with the virus. But I think those things will continue post-virus, because they're very much easier to do. Someone will sign up and say, do you want to, do you want to spend an hour on Thursday evening finding out about renewables? That doesn't sound too much of a commitment, does it? Than saying on Monday and Tuesday, we're all going to go down to Somerset. That's a bigger commitment. So I think there's good and bad with this. I think we're definitely seeing some introduction of initiatives that are for the better and were caused by the virus, but we're now bringing in to create more engagement between, and that touches on your last question as well, which is the relationship between merchants and suppliers. But on events, I agree with John. I really, and I hope that the optimism, comes out and bears fruit, because there is quite a bit of bullish going ahead, and obviously awards as well. Deeply disappointed that the awards couldn't happen this month, but hopefully they will. I'm sure they will. I think people, we want to get back to doing it, don't we? As somebody said, it's a people industry, and we desperately want that. So we incidentally, just on the people bit, we asked our team last week. We've only got 15 here. Do any of you want to work at home? And they unanimously said, no way. No way. Please, in fact, a couple of them said, please don't send us home. I spoke to our accountancy firm last week, a company called Carpenter Box, based in Worthing, and I spoke to somebody who was working from home, and she said, I'm working at home, Robin. I said, how's that? She said, I hate it. I've been told I must. And I think that's sad.
Location of the IPG, I think, Robin.
Sorry?
It's the location of the IPG's head office. It's a very nice place to work.
I don't know about that. If we start flooding, it could be a different matter. But
Stewart, you've had your hand up for quite a while.
I mean, obviously, with in terms of the livery company and so on as well, the fact is we have no events planned this year. Everything's cancelled. But and London in particular, where so many events are held, but in general, with what would be normally a live event, you just cannot recreate it. So many of the conferences, of course, have motivational speakers and some really good speakers, but someone sitting in front of the screen telling you how difficult it's been for them. They've had injury after injury, and hey, I came back after the Lex injury, and here's my gold medal. You just can't recreate that over a screen. That personal contact is just not there. There's no empathy with an audience, and if I'm just this, there we go. I was going to try and do something clever, but I can't. But there you go. But I could put a picture. The installation for me would have 2 weeks ago should have been in Goldsmiths Hall, which is a magnificent hall in London. And so I can put a screen up behind me. So actually, some of you might have seen that when I first came on. So I could put the interior of Goldsmiths Hall behind us. But the fact is, I'm just in my office. Yeah, it's just not the same. It just isn't. I was going to try and be really clever there, but I can't be. There you go. See, that is.
You need a 20-year-old, Stewart.
Yeah, I do. Careful on that one. Yeah. So
okay.
Anyone else? So you actually can't recreate it. We know that. So again, it comes back to balance and what comes forward. There you
go. Just picking up on Robin's point on training, as a matter of interest, virtual training has not worked for us at all. We've tried to get some courses up and running. With limited success. There's no appetite for it at all.
It's working for us, but it's small groups. It's small groups, and it's
small groups, and probably 20-minute bursts or 40-minute bursts. But
and it's based on an acceleration from 0. So I suppose that's the key thing. So it's what you're measuring it against. But manufacturers might come in.
But I was told, Robin. Everybody was telling me, well, we've got all these people furloughed and all these people at home that are doing nothing. Of course, they can go on training courses. So you guys put virtual training courses on, you'll be swamped.
Yeah, because they've got to be interested in doing them in the first place. That's the difference. Those people furloughed didn't want to be on training. And if you say to them, while you're furloughed, why don't you do training? They're thinking, because I don't want to do it. Please don't make me do it. But if you're asking an independent merchant that actually wants to do it, then that's different. So I get that. Yeah, there is a distinction.
Ian, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I get the point around virtual training, and certainly we're trialing something at the moment. Actually, it's a new initiative. It's called Lunch and Learn. What we're doing is actually it's product training, and we're sending out a Just Eat voucher in advance of the training session, asking the customer or the sales team to get themselves lunch on us. We've sent them a product in advance, and we've created a studio here at the sort of HQ whereby we've got multiple camera angles, and we're getting people to take the products apart and learn about the features and benefits. And it's a quick, short burst. It's half an hour, but they get something to eat. It's a lot of interaction. It's early days, but actually it's been quite good fun. I've done it myself. I've actually learned some stuff myself, but certainly we're trialing it internally, but the plan is to try it with customers as well.
You know what a mixer shower is now, don't you, Ian?
I certainly do.
But that's been lost, hasn't it? Because one of the joys of going to a merchant is to actually have a feel and
get your hands on the product.
you're bringing it to them, really, you know, and the fact you're feeding them well always encourages people to go into it.
If we don't try it, we'll never know.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Any comments to make about the sort of how you've changed from sort of face-to-face meetings? We've obviously heard about the sales side from you, Gareth. Is there anything else you want to say about face-to-face specifically?
Yeah, I think again, I mean, Stewart used the words, it'll be a blend again. So I think, you know, we're looking at, as Ian said, the Lunch and Learn's one initiative we're trying for training. But even things like going back to some kind of showcase vehicle that we can take to branches, so we don't have to physically go into the branch itself, and possibly we can educate installers and stuff by using a socially distant, safe environment that sits in the car park. Now, obviously, there's logistical issues with that, but so I think it will be a blend of using the technology, but maybe, you know, thinking differently about how we interact with the customer as well.
Okay.
And we did a survey recently across the industry, 550 HR professionals, called the People Survey. That was interesting because, and we're presenting this at the next HR forum, 95% of trainers said that they saw face-to-face training returning within the next 3 to 4 months. So there's certainly, that's exactly what we're banking on, of course, but it's not just in the merchant sector. This issue is across the whole of the construction industry, but it's reasonably positive that face-to-face training is starting to come back, and we certainly the last 2 weeks we've seen the bookings of face-to-face training in February and March have gone through the roof. So I am encouraged that we are starting to think and move back to training, but more importantly to face-to-face training rather than virtual training. Yeah, I think a lot of people are just zoomed out, to be honest. You know, we spend, I mean, I've been on these calls since 7:30 this morning till 5, and that's typical. And I, you know, I've had enough of it. Don't underestimate that craving to just actually see people face to face.
Present company excluded from that, I assume.
Of course, Andrew. Of course.
This is the worst one of the day.
Yeah, unfortunately, I see your face more than most people's.
I was thinking something that hasn't changed between the virtual conference world and the real conference world is getting John Newcombe to buy you a beer.
I will buy you all a beer in June of next year.
Yeah.
I'll hold you to that.
Those are easy, loose words, John.
Well, I'll hold you to that, John.
Yeah, I'm sure
we
you
all will, John. We all will. Okay, moving on. Digital sales.
Did you say there's 60 on the call, Tim?
Sorry?
Did you say there's 60 on the call?
Digital sales increased significantly during the pandemic. And there was again, I keep alluding to the Plumbing Heating Forum, but Eureka interviewed 2,000 business owners about what they were doing digitally. And business owners have adapted their working practices with 44% purchasing more products online and 38% only using click and collect merchant services. So that's a sign of businesses actually going down the digital route. How can you share your online ordering and click and collect success stories with us, please? Ken.
Okay, we have our own online business here, and I'll be honest with you, since April we've seen sales double, which has been great news for us because it's given us an outlet while we were, not operating at full strength in the trade counters. It has given us some challenges, if I'm honest, both in terms of supplying product, actually getting it in through the door, which we see across the board everywhere. And the biggest one actually is with our third-party logistics, actually getting it to our customers, because the likes of our friends at DPD and FedEx and that are so busy. They're so overwhelmed with the likes of Next and Boohoo and all these people now, that have almost tripled, quadrupled their business, has impacted on our service to our customers. And one of the things I did look at, which I'm glad I didn't do now, was at the beginning of the year in using distribution to do some of our logistics for us. Actually, I know a couple of other businesses that do that, where they're wholly reliant on distribution, doing a home delivery for them, effectively closed down. They couldn't trade because they didn't carry stock, whereas we have our warehouse here with about £1 million of stock, so we're self-sufficient. But I certainly know some of those online businesses that only drop ship struggled massively. So from our point of view, it's worked really well, but it's a balancing act to make sure that that our online business doesn't conflict with our trade counter business. And by that, I've seen loads of merchants over the years, because I come from manufacturing prior to this, where they have an online business that's actually cheaper than the trade counter business. So the customer then relates going in and going, I can buy it cheaper online, then you'll deliver it for me. So it's been a very fine balancing act for us as it's grown.
But you are offering choice, which is important for customers, isn't it?
It's offering choice, but it's also one of the biggest things that we've seen, and I alluded back to it earlier on with our sales team, where a lot of our contract clients now have sent staff home to work from home, so they haven't got all those interruptions at work. And we're actually finding a lot of large contractors coming through to our online business asking for tenders, rather than just, I want to buy a toilet seat, I want to buy this. They're actually coming on board saying, we've got these row houses you want to build, can you do it? Which is quite good, because we then pass that on to the other parts of the business that are more able to deal with it. So not necessarily being contacted by an online business, it might be contacted by a contracts business, it might be somebody's asked for them to do a design for the bathroom, so we pass it to our retail business. So it's benefited us in a lot of ways, not just somebody coming on, ordering a bathroom suite or ordering a toilet and getting it delivered. It's actually affecting other parts of our business as well. So it's been really good from that point of view, to the point now where we're looking on our normal trade counter site. One thing that I've been wanting to do for many years is to have a click and collect option on our trade counter. But it's been very difficult to justify that when the customer comes in anyway, whereas actually now it's allowing us to accelerate the views and actually sort of start to put a budget forward to develop that over the next sort of 6 months to 12 months. So yeah, I think, as someone alluded to earlier, it's brought us all forward about 5 years. We'll actually might make the 21st century if we're lucky.
There's another success story then to go along with what we mentioned before, basically.
Yeah, as I say, it's something that I had the option when I came here a few years ago. Did we want to continue with it? Because it is, you do put a lot of money into online when you start, and it is that balancing act of how, do you get that critical mass to make it work? And I think the pandemic has certainly sped that up for us, without a doubt.
Okay.
I think it's important, Tim, to differentiate between online developments and digitalisation. I mean, you've called this digital sales, but for me, digital transformation is more than just, whether you've got an online transaction offer. Yeah. In the Construction Leadership Council, we have now a digital work stream, and that's because the construction industry over the next sort of 15, 20 years has to change dramatically. So, you are seeing the developments of PIM systems, by the buying groups. We've obviously have the Eaton classification model. You have BIM that's obviously is operating currently in one sector, but will develop. So this is it's broader than just online sales. It's how does the industry adopt and adapt to the transformation that's going to take place in construction over the next sort of 15, 20 years, because that is a massive trend. And again, let's make sure we're at the forefront of this and not left behind.
We've actually appointed a digital officer onto the board to look at that whole end-to-end journey. You're right, it's not just sales, it's the whole end-to-end journey. So there's a lot of work to be done, that's for sure.
Would he be the youngest member on your board now, then, Ian?
Yes, he would be. Younger than me, Ken.
I thought he might be.
But Ian, that just goes to show the fact you're getting a board member to deal specifically with this. It just shows how important it actually is now.
It's something we actually he actually joined us during the pandemic, but it was the process was last year because we could see this coming, not the pandemic, but the whole digitalisation of our own organisation needed to change. So yeah, it was something we had in the plan anyway. But as we've said, it's certainly it's been accelerated, and hopefully we'll be there ahead of others.
Andrew, is it? Haven't TP recently recruited somebody from Asda from a digital background?
Yeah, but that's a replacement role, John. So yes, we have, but that replaces that role that's been in play for years, if I'm honest. I mean, TP, you know, TP invested in digital very early, both in terms of click and collect, you know, the ability to trade online, you know, EDI, and it invested early. The bit that's interesting is if you look at businesses like Toolstation, you know, they are far more advanced than businesses like TP, and the customer uptake it's been far easier with those customers using the likes of a Toolstation than those more traditional customers that use the likes of a TP. So it's not just us that has to change, it is the customer base as well. And whilst, like everybody, we've seen huge changes, it's still relatively small compared to the total business that we do. Now that is going to shift over time, and we all know that. But it will be this balance between traditional ways of trading with the ability to make life easier for customers. And John, you'll remember a few years ago, I presented to the BMF conference this thing about the age of the disruptor. And you know what disruptor businesses do is they just make trading simpler, easier, and more convenient, 7 days a week, 24/7. Now, unfortunately, merchants are still far too traditional in their thinking, their opening hours, and how they allow customers to interact. And if you look at Screwfix and Toolstation, they will have outperformed any merchant throughout this pandemic simply because they're so accessible. And I think the real key for merchants, and something that we have to challenge as well as the digitalization, is this accessibility and allowing customers to use our operations at a time to suit them, not at a time to suit us, if we want to win.
Mm-hmm.
Stewart.
Yeah, just to carry on from Andrew's disruptor there, going back 5 or 6 years, I did a piece at the NMBS conference, which was around the dinosaur in your business. And it was, what we have to be careful of is, in terms of merchants, is that Fred joins at 16 and eventually gets through to becomes a branch manager, but actually there is nowhere else for him to go, and he becomes almost a bed blocker for new talent behind that. So you have to watch that. But equally, within the business itself, and particularly independents, you have to look at who is actually the dinosaur of your business, who is actually stopping the business going forward. So right at the beginning of this session, I said about the importance of digital stuff, and we've just returned to it now. But actually, you know, and I've returned now to age and so on as well. Now, I think most people on this group are pretty well versed in digital. We might not know it technically, but actually we very much have taken it on board. But I'm not sure that every business has, and particularly smaller businesses and so on. So actually you can almost, the dinosaur can almost become the owner of the business who's not prepared to allow, because of the unknown of digital, it's not something he's comfortable with, that actually that becomes a bed blocking to the actual growth of the business as well. So disruptor, dinosaur, whatever you want to be, I'm not being rude on that, but actually it is going to be something that will need to be addressed going forward. If not, it will hold back businesses.
Okay, everyone happy? So just kind of the final question then, really, what does the future hold for merchants, suppliers, manufacturers? We all wish we had a crystal ball. No, we don't know how it's going to be next week, let alone 3 or 4 months down the line. So where are we at? What are we going to be looking forward to in the future? If everybody wants to contribute to that one as a kind of a summing up of the round table.
I'll kick it off.
Okay.
I'm a naturally optimistic person, as many of the people on this call know. I'm quite optimistic about the industry and about the future. I think the merchants, the word that I constantly hear described for merchants is resilient, and I think that's a great word to describe this sector. And I think what we've proved over the last 6 or 7 months is the resilience of the sector, the ability to bounce back as we did during the last recession. So I think there are lots of reasons to be optimistic, to pick up sort of Ian's theme from the last plumbing and heating forum. I think I take Stuart's point about you can only put 1 kitchen in and 1 bathroom. The facts are people have more disposable income. They are spending on DIY and home improvement projects. All of the forecasts from GfK say that will continue, at least for the next 6 months. Of course, people are going to start airline travel and foreign holidays, etc. But again, I've been on 3 regional meetings over the last couple of weeks. Most people are seeing very good order books from anywhere between 3 and 6 months into the new year. I think the elephant in the room is Brexit, which we haven't touched upon. I do think there's going to be a deal. It'll be a skinny deal, but I'm optimistic about a deal. I do think that the vaccine will make a massive difference, and I think we'll be out of this in the spring. And let's face it, we had such a disastrous second quarter this year. Next year, it can only be more. It can only be more beneficial. Every forecast I'm seeing, construction industry, BMF's forecast, CPA's forecast, is forecasting growth next year of between 3 and 5%. Every single forecast. Boris is building.
Sorry, your 3 and 5%. Is that off the 19 base or off a 20 base?
No, that's off 20 base. That's off 20 base. But
yeah, that's then down on 19. So 20 base is a daft. Sorry, I'm not being rude to you, but is a daft comparator. You've really got to reset to 19 to get any meaningful understanding of what the market's doing.
Yeah, I'm just talking year-on-year growth and the forecasts that have come out, Andrew. But the point I'm making is that we don't see next year. We see next year being a growth year, and it's pretty consistent. There's a consistent message across the industry right now. So I know you are a bit more pessimistic, Andrew, in terms of the future, but I'm giving my perspective on the way I see it. Boris's messages of build back better, the whole focus on the greener economy. I do believe we'll get a national retrofit strategy at some stage. All of these things are very positive developments for our sector. I see more positives than I do negatives, and that's what I'll end on, Tim.
Thank you, Joel. You are working 11 hours a day, don't forget, so you'll get more information than everybody else. Okay, that's positive. Is everybody else as positive as John is?
Well, I think the bit we shouldn't lose sight of is the underlying investment criteria for why you would want to be in the building industry going forward. This country still has got a huge shortage of housing. The housing stock we do have is old and in need of repair. And therefore, all of the underlying reasons to believe are still there. So, I wish I was 21 having another go round the loop. I do think 2021 will be a challenging year. And I think it is misleading to talk about growth on 2020. Because most organisations' infrastructure is in play on the volumes that we had in 19, and therefore, if you compare against 19, I suspect we will be at lower volumes, and therefore there will be challenges in 2021 for some organisations within our sector. So short term, it ain't over yet, folks, but long term, yeah, I would invest in this sector time and time again. And I wish I was, as I said, I wish I was 20 and having another go at it. I might do a few things a bit better, but yeah, I'd have another go.
Ian, when you were talking at the Plumbing Heating Forum, you said, on a positive note, the recovery is expected to be much sharper than previous recessions. So you're positive?
Certainly, we've seen that recovery in this year, certainly much quicker than we'd experienced or even forecast. I think next year, yes, it's going to be challenging. Yes, we baseline our growth on 2019 rather than 20, and we are forecasting a small growth on 2019, but it very much depends by sector. But overall, we expect to see a small level of growth over 19. I think Peter said it earlier, I think it's going to be a fascinating year. I think there's going to be certainly some winners and losers. And the one thing's for certain is it'll continue to change the market, and we need to embrace that change and ensure that all of us are on the winning side rather than the losing side. There will be winners and losers.
Okay. Paul, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, that really is, yeah. It's a proper poison chalice, that question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm really unsure, if I'm honest. I mean, having been through the 7 months now since since the first lockdown, and seeing what's happened and what's changed, and how the industry's adapted to it and moved forward. You have to be positive. If you can have survived what we've all survived from a business perspective, why can't we keep moving forward? It's a good point from Andrew about you've got to look at 2019, not 2020, to get a proper balance, because a lot of the infrastructure is based around 2019. I think we've got to continue to be positive and bold, as John's talked about, and we've got to be proactive. We've got to keep marching forward, even if it's inch by inch. Picking up Ian's point about being open-minded and flexible to move different ways and not be scared to try things is really important. I think it was Stewart's point about the digitalization and making sure we surround ourselves with the right people to drive digitalization. Let's be honest, no matter how open-minded we are at 50 plus, it's the 20 somethings who really understand digitalization. Yeah. We play at it, and it's interesting. We're doing a lot of talk about this ourselves. I can't remember how you phrased it, Stewart, about the MD being the blocker, or can be a blocker.
Protect the potential dinosaur within the industry, within the company.
And we'd started. Somebody had picked up this phrase somewhere. The phrase HIPPO, highest paid. What's it? Highest paid point of view, that you naturally follow what the person at the top says, even though they may not be the expert in it. So I think that's important to adapt that. And then a personal one for me is that we don't automatically revert to how we were working before, so we get the balance right between face to face and virtual, because I think virtual has stripped out a lot of fleshy meetings, a lot of fleshy interactions. You're certainly a lot more focused and shorter and sharper on this. You're having more communication, which is good, but equally we do need to get the physical stuff back. And I just hope that that as an industry we don't overnight become too defensive and start chopping at things when we have a bit of a plateau or a flat spot. But for me, it's about proactivity. If we've survived the 7 months we've been through with a smile on our face, in a positive tone, we've done a damn good job, and we should keep doing it. And I would just echo kind of where it all started from before we finish, because I've not said it. I think John and the BMF have done an astounding job, because as we went into lockdown, the lights went off and none of us had a bloody clue. Some of the discussions that must have been going on in all the businesses must have been horrendous. And the BMF were a beacon for us. We gravitated to it, and whilst maybe not being able to give all the answers, it was the place to go to for it. So one may that continue. Well done, John, and well done all the team. But positivity, proactivity. Come on, let's keep going at it.
That's Paul.
Paul, Stewart.
Yeah, just to sort of echo the BMF stuff, I have to say, John would concur. I emailed John, having worked quite closely with him for a number of years at the BMF. The work that was put in by the BMF was just phenomenal, really. And my message was exactly as I heard earlier on, was that if you couldn't think of a good reason to be part of the BMF, then absolutely you would have seen it through this period of time. So John and the team, absolutely well done. So, I think that's a very clear message from today. John also mentioned about robust and resilience. Like, I remember the 2007 conference, I think it was the NBS conference at that time as well. And every speaker seemed to use, every other word was robust or resilience. And every other word was robust and resilience. It was the phrase, and it's come back into vogue a bit at the moment. I kind of go back to the word that I used earlier on, and that was balance. We all crave normality. Everyone in our lives, everybody craves some form of normality. Now, I'm pretty sure we're not going to get straight back to what we perceive as normality. There are changes now and adaptability in everything we do. Did I ever think I'd be walking around with a face mask on? No, I didn't. But the fact is, I'm sure every one of us is doing that. So this adaptability will be in and around the balance that we could in all our lives, not just our work lives, but our social lives, our family lives, and so on as well. And we need to get that back in, the lurching from one side, whether it be e-commerce, digital, or to the other side, or, oh no, we'll all charge over here now, we must be doing this. I think that's probably the worst thing that we could probably do. It's time for cool heads and rational thinking, not just lurching from side to side. So balance is absolutely my word. And everything I would reinforce actually that everything goes full circle. Now this circle might be a bit bigger, it might take a bit longer, but it will go full circle. And my other point is actually is in my insulation speech, which I don't think many of you would have heard the other day. But actually, in my private life is football, and we quite often hear that a game is a game of two halves, and I just hope that the second half, i.e., next year, is going to be a better half than the half we've had to endure, even though we've probably been quite successful at what we've done in our adaptability.
I've just done the Worshipful Company of Builders Merchants page in BMN, and you mentioned in that...
it's in there as well, yeah.
It's in there as well. So
yeah.
What team do you support, Stuart?
Brighton.
Yeah, he's getting that in before they go down and join us.
Could be worse, Stuart. You could be like me, a Derby County fan. So.
Well, there you go.
Ooh.
There you go.
Oh dear.
Yeah, that's not good.
Gareth, do you want to come in and talk about what you think the future holds? Obviously, you've got major responsibility over sales teams. How do you think that's going to go further forward?
Yeah, I think in terms of the economy and whatever, who knows? I guess I'm hoping that the extension of the furlough scheme extends, whether it is a bubble or not. It helps us out with the economy, at least in the short term. But I think is it fundamentally going to change the way in which we interact with our customers? Actually, I don't believe so. I think we go back to that word that was used before, which Stewart said, which was balance. I think we'll try and take the positives and the best from the opportunities that the new technology creates for us. But ultimately, this is a face-to-face industry. And I guess I don't, in the longer term, fundamentally see that changing. But let's take the best of what the new world can give us and combine it with the best of what we've been doing traditionally. And I think that the reality is it will lie somewhere in between those two.
Yeah.
Okay. Ken?
Yeah, I'm a bit like John. I'm a born optimist. I have to be coming back here. But we're like many businesses at the moment. We're looking at budgeting process for next year. And to echo probably what Andrew said is we're looking at 2019. We've written off 2020. It is what it is. Nothing we can do about it. We've lost sales. We will be behind on last year. But that's our trigger point and our reset point for next year. I think one of the big positives come out of this year is actually, from my point of view, I took over last April on a business that has been fairly stagnant and people doing the same old thing, the same old way for many, many years. And we all have this saying, if you carry on doing the same way, you're going to get the same result.
Same results.
Actually, what it's allowed us to do is actually this has given us a bit of breathing space to actually look at what we've been doing, what we want to do for the future, and how we can make it better. But it's also addressed a lot of the skill fade that we had in our business. I think we've got so many people who've been here for so long and they've done it the same old way and actually forgotten how to do it, if that makes sense. They get lazy. And I don't mean that, they're not on purpose. They've just got lazy because we do it that way. Somebody else will do it for us, or we've forgotten how to do it. And we introduced a new back office system a couple of years ago. And what we tried to do is they've tried to make it like the old back office system, rather than utilise it for all its abilities and integrate it into what we want to do going forward. So, yeah, I'm really positive about next year. We don't know, like everybody else, we don't know what the new first quarter is going to bring. We'll worry about that when it arrives. We're certainly exiting at the end of this year. We're seeing our contracts business go back through the roof as we did last year. And we're already picking up nice orders for delivery in the first quarter. We just hope that we don't get another lockdown and we can actually start delivering it. So, yeah. I think it is positive, but I think it's now we've got rid of a number of people. We've changed those people that have found this difficult and haven't been able to work with us. And I think we'll have a solid base moving into 2021.
Okay, thanks for that, Ken. Robin, I for one would much rather be at the National Space Centre to go along and see your conference rather than a Zoom meeting or doing something virtually. So fingers crossed that something will be brilliant like that again next year. But do you see that happening yourself? How do you see the future?
I don't think you should give up on this planet, Tim, and find another one. Come on. I think if we look at the future as a road, we've got some bumps ahead, but I think the road's going uphill. I think there are reasons there are some underlying reasons that's been said that for the industry to grow. The bumps have been well documented during this call. The availability, complacency, understanding the rules, all that. But we're more used to those bumps, and we're going to manage them better. So, yeah, definitely broadly optimistic. I think we've all said things about where people are going to spend their money. Are they going to have it? But we're not a nation of savers, are we? So, traditionally, we're going to spend that money. Yes, it might. Some people are going to jump on planes and things. But broadly, I'd say that's an optimistic thing. And of course, we all know the one constant thing in life is change. So, we just got to crack on. We're advertising for 2 new staff as we speak. We wrestled with it because we thought some people are out furloughing people, but plan ahead. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, don't you? So, I think cautious optimism is the order of the day, and yeah, there'll be some bumps, won't there? Even we've still got this year. We're not writing this year off. We've got a couple of busy months. For many of us included, my business, November's the busiest month of the whole year, bar none. And I think that's going to be the same. And as we go into next year, as someone said, we've got to keep an eye on the fact that we measure it against 2019 in previous years to be a real comparison. But to some extent, 21's going to be, some factors are going to be the same as 20. It's just that we're starting with elements of the pandemic, whereas in 20 we started thinking there wasn't one. It was just something that was going on in some place in China, wasn't it? But yeah, I'm very optimistic.
You do realise, Robin, that by going to see one of your members tomorrow, the other 299 will be expecting the same service, don't you?
I don't know. They'll probably ring him and say, well, if he said a load of rubbish, we're not going to see him. But
sure, that's not the case. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much indeed to Bristan for giving us the opportunity to hold this. Just want to say thank you to everybody who's given up their valuable time today. That's 2 hours of really constructive discussion. Who's to say what will happen in the future? No one knows, but we've all tried to try and come up with reasons as to what we're going to expect as an industry. But as I've said in many columns before in my magazine, it's a very, very resilient industry, and I think the builders merchant sector will come through this like it has done in the past. So I'd just like to say thank you very much indeed to everybody. Really enjoyed it, and stay safe and well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well done, Tim.
Catch you
Well
soon.
done for
Thank you.
Be safe.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
take care. Thanks, everyone.